I'm joined by Gun and Anders. If you don't know them, go home and do your homework. You really should. And we're here to talk a bit about governance and active ownership in M&A situations. And you both represent active owners, but in different capacities. Anders, you're head of equities at AMF, and Gun, you've been on a lot of boards and are still on a lot of boards. It would be interesting to see a little bit how this works in practice. Sort of, Anders, from your perspective, sort of when and how do you want to engage in M&A situation?
Let me be a little bit like a political, because I hear what you're asking, but I'm not going to ask the question. But taking a step back, AMF is the blue-collar workers' pension fund in Sweden. We have about 4 million Swedish clients, and we have approximately 100 Swedish companies in our portfolio. And of those 100 companies, we are in the nomination committee of 44. So we are taking action to nominate people for the board at the AGM. So having said that, we are more taking... Our first goal is to make performance, to make money, but we also have a responsibility for the company that we are owning. So we are not shipping them just away. So now when you're asking me what happened when I got the call from this panel that we have here, up here earlier, I used to say to them, please give me a call at the early stage, because it's a possibility that we won't sell, even though it's up for grab at the stock market, because we want it still to be listed. That could be one. So come in an early stage to discuss with us. And we have no problem at all to be an insider and discuss this matter. Secondly, we are willing, maybe sometimes, to become an owner of an unlisted company, to take that off market. We did that with ICA, a food store company in Sweden. We bought that with the main owners, and we took 10% of that company off the market. But the third is when it happened to the mergers is, of course, that if we are in a good position and could have a good dialogue, and we are sure that the company will be in a good harbor, so to speak, we will support the transaction. I think that will be very good for the company and for the merger at whole. But so that is what we are aiming at. So we are looking from that perspective. Could the company get into the right harbor? And then we're willing to sell. Well, otherwise, we are willing to be an owner, unlisted or listed.
Very, very, very good. I don't think that was political at all. Gun, so he wants to call early. But can you walk us through? I mean, you've seen a lot of M&A situations, and you've also been representing active owners and been in charge of a very active owner. So what is the, if you give them a bit of an inside view, sort of what is the board's role? What's the most critical thing for the board in these situations, you think?
I think that all of the companies, when you work as an active owner, you need always to ask a lot of questions, because that is the way you can, and especially what you cannot read in the material you have got in the board material. And that is also, otherwise you normally make sure there are good processes in the company for doing M&A, depending if you do one M&A a year, that's one process maybe. If you do 15 a year, that's another process. Mm-hmm. And then if you maybe do more than 50 a year, which is one company I know is doing, then you need to treat them differently. But you need to be very interested as a board member, and you need to really ask, I would say, the right questions and not only taking what you are reading in the board material for granted. Because you have a responsibility to do your own little checking as well, I think.
And ahead of this panel, we discussed a little bit about public to private situations. Now, you mentioned to me that it's not always the last dollar that's the most important. There are other considerations here at stake. Do you elaborate a bit on what those are?
Yeah, but for us as a public investor, I think it's very important so we know what will happen to the company when it's for example, taken off market. What will happen to the employees? What will happen to the work situation in Sweden or in what other countries? But because we have responsibility, so we can maybe let it go for $1 less if we know there's going to be a good harbor. But we're going to say no if we don't feel that it's going to be a good place to be at. And that is very important for us, that we have stated that. And I think it's important for me as a manager to mention that to all my clients and say, we're going to take responsibility for the company, because we know that this not Gun representing flesh and blood. I'm representing the faceless owner. But I think that is most important, that the asset manager take that role, because we know that the asset manager grow, but you have to have an idea what you will do with the company if there is going to be a target on that one. And that is what we're trying to do. I'm not saying we're doing that perfect, but that's at least a business idea we got.
Maybe I can do a comment as well, because we look upon it a little bit more differently, since being an active owner and the companies I am still working on as a board, there we normally have a bigger stake in the company, even if it's never 100%, but it's still, you are the majority owner, and that is a responsibility. But doing M&A then is also something, it's not the easiest thing is to look at the financials actually, because that is principles how you deal with that. But what you need to check and put a big value on is also how well does the company you are trying to acquire fit into your culture? Does that match going forward? Because it's easy to buy something, you pay a lot of money, and then suddenly you missed that it doesn't fit with your own values. And that it can create a lot of frustration going forward, and you don't get the performance you expect. The other thing is also that I think you underestimate the due diligence of HR when you buy a company, because it is flesh and blood who do the job for you. So you need to, I personally believe you need to do a little bit more checking on those things. And then the other thing is, it really starts once you have acquired a company. So I always ask, and people know that now in the board, that I always ask, who is the top team you have who are going to take care of the integration now? And who am I going to look in the eyes when things are not going the right way? So I think these type of things are not operational, because you are not operational being a board member, but you need to check those type of things and get the feeling if you get the right type of answers.
And how has the landscape changed, you think, in an M&A situation? I mean, we discussed, the index funds or the passive funds. There are quite a lot of them, and there are also, the emergence of more sort of they're not activist funds, but they're sort of activist investors that take a stake and they want to engage. How has that changed the landscape, and what are the effects, you think?
Well, I've seen at least the index fund have no business idea when it comes to the company, because they only buy stocks. And when Jan is saying that just do it, it's not so very easy if you have a lot of index funds that own the company, because you won't get an answer. And those professionals, and I do respect them, but they only care if there's in the index or not in the index. And we had that situation when we bought ICA. We got up to 89.8, and then the rest was indexes. And they couldn't sell because the share was not out of the indexes. And then you have to ask yourself, you as a client or you as a financial advisor, and say, what is the business idea of the index funds when two companies would like to merge, or is a really good business idea? And the index guys or girls say, hey, it's in the indexes, and we can't take that out. And that is a pity, I think. And I think that the industry really should look upon that matter, because mergers can do a very, very good thing sometimes. And that is stopping this. I can see that's very clear.
And if we sort of switch a little bit to the macro environment, everyone is talking about the macro environment. what are the biggest consequences you think in this new environment? I mean, it's a very broad question, but what you know you have, but a difference from previous crisis. Then you could define the problem, right? It was in some sense easier. Now there's a lot of moving targets. It's energy, it's war in Ukraine, it's monetary easing, it's all kinds of stuff. Has that sort of made this a lot?
Everything goes much faster,
right?
Goes up and down, and you need to be more on your toes also in the company, getting information, and there is a lot of information available nowadays as well. So it's but what I personally see in the boards where I'm active, and also in the companies I worked a little bit myself closer to, is that it's come more now into making sure that you have very good control over your cash. Because even if the banks are standing there, we are financing you, the M&A and so on, at least there are very clear checkings on how much more loans can you really take on, and what type of limits do that put on the acquisitions you can do. And with now the increased interest rates, there will be less probably money available if you checking how much you need to have in cash to then spend on acquisitions, because you have to pay interest rates instead in cash. So I think that will be, especially in smaller companies, you will see that happen, I think. So there will be a little bit lower activity probably if you don't take on more leverage and more risk. And I think that companies are careful today doing that.
And it got to be affecting the financing of transactions as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we talked a bit about timing issues as well. We discussed this. Are people now more in a waiting mode? And you mentioned, Gun, also that maybe people are getting more to equilibrium, sort of accepting a new reality on valuations.
I think personally, you see now that, and that especially the non-public companies, that the sellers are starting to realize that the values, they were top a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, but now we have a new world. So if a seller still need to sell, you probably come closer to negotiations today, and you fix those type of agreements. I personally think that is something we will see going forward.
You see the same thing, Anders, on the valuation stuff?
When it comes to unlisted companies that came to us and say, hey, we want to sell, they are still at the 21 level and say, we are so valuable, we have this fantastic company. And what happened is we don't buy it, we are very restricted. So again, now I can see that the unlisted market is higher than the listed market, so it's much easier, cheaper for me to buy at the stock market than buy the unlisted. But that is exactly what's going to happen. What Gun say is take a little time, and that will come down, and then we can do business again.
Do we have any questions from the audience when you finally have Anders and Gun here? Anyone? Yep.
If you have Svante Ade, I think a few people know who I am, but if we look at the companies where you have a listing, but you have an owner that says, I'm not interested in strategic transactions, what is your view of the value in the stock market of those situations? Because there are examples that I've seen over the years where you actually get much lower valuation in the public market when you make it absolutely clear that you're not interested in a, shall we say, controlled premium, as we used to call them. What's your reaction to that?
If I should start to answer on that one, you can fill me. I have to say, if you realize that this company never will be sold, you have to take that into consideration when you look upon the company. And that's what we do. We have the opportunity for being a large owner in Sweden that we have communication with a large owner. And if we have people or persons say we're never going to sell, we know that is, we have to take that into consideration when we do the valuation of the company. So it means less or a lower valuation, of course.
Yeah, I think that if you like to be an active owner and long-term owner, I think I would strongly ask, should you still own those shares? Maybe it's better you put the money somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably something you need to discuss also in the also on board level, because you need to make sure you have a good combo or structure of the owner.
Absolutely.
And that's what I personally like with you as well, because you are a more active owner than even if you are a pension fund.
Yes.
So, and that is also just a comment from me on what I've seen. We talked about the index funds coming in, and especially we see tendencies now that they are not participating in a nomination board. We have a fantastic governance model in Sweden. It's unique in a way, where you have nomination committee, which is very clear what the different levels on how you decide things in a company, in a public company. But so that I think is something I don't understand. We discuss it a lot in the Swedish Corporate Governance Board for these things, and the other thing is also using now, as ISS is saying, that you should not vote for discharge for the board members if you have different votes or you represent an owner where you have different votes. I don't understand those things. No. Then I don't think that is an owner which is responsible, to be honest.
Yeah. Do we have another question as well, or yeah?
But what can then be done about that? I mean, from a national regulator's perspective, I mean, it's a global phenomena. How do you see that it can be resolved and tackled?
I can start. If AMF funds will start an index fund, I don't think that will be done. But if we will do that, I can assure you that AMF will tell how we will react if we have a merger situation, and say we will go out, we will sell our shares and accept the bid, and even though we'll get under 90%, and that we will have to tell our customers. And I think that this phenomenon has not been shown, so no one had thought about it, but it's going to be very, very clear when Jan and the other guys around here going to do a lot of proposition and say, hey, let's do a lot of deals. And that is, the index funds have increased so much, that's going to be a hard thing to solve, so to speak.
Someone would go here just.
For you, I have a question. You obviously, as AMF, own many Nordic listed and also unlisted companies. But if two of these companies suddenly merge where you're a major shareholder, and you have to vote on both sides, this will come up in the future, maybe has come up. How do you deal with that from a corporate governance point of view? If you're a major shareholder, not just if you have less than 1%, but if that situation will come up at some point, and for different boards and different shareholders have different views, and you're in the middle of that. So I would like to see how you, as Chief Investment Officer, Head of Equities and Ownership, would react to that.
I will take advice from you, Jan. No, definitely not.
That is more expensive.
No, to be honest, we have thought about that situation. Therefore, we don't own 4 banks in Sweden. We only own 2 banks. We try not to own the competitors. But if you come up with a suggestion that I haven't thought about it, I don't have a good idea for the time being. If you say that Alpha will merge with Sandvik or something like that, I haven't thought about it. But I think we will do what we think is the best for our customers, and how we should explain that. And that will be another topic.
It's interesting you're asking that question, Jan. I wonder what that means. And final question, perhaps to Gun here. How sort of you've been doing this for a long time. Sort of has the dynamics between the board, the management, and owners like Anders, have that changed in the past years?
I think there is always representing a major long-term owner. You always need to make sure that you align with the major other shareholders as well. So you meet and you discuss and so on. So it's not. I think it hasn't changed that much from the past, because it's all about relations, and you need to create those and have those and work with those relations all the time. So. And then with the relation with the management, there are clear rules what management do and what the board do.
Yeah.
So I think that is also that's what is so unique with the Swedish model. I think.
Yeah. So here for the Swedish model. Time is up. We 10 seconds. So right. So we have. If someone has a final question, we can take it. Otherwise, we need to break for another panel. Oh, all good. Thank you, Gun. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.